We all see those headlines, right? Scrolling through the lists of the world's wealthiest people, and you kind of just think, wow, how did they actually do that? It's endlessly fascinating, this world of the ultra-rich, who they are, how they manage to build these incredible fortunes. But you start to wonder, beyond all the jets and the companies, is there something deeper? Like a common thread, a specific path maybe, especially when you look at their education. Is it all just brilliant ideas, or does formal schooling play a bigger part than we might think?
That's exactly the question we're digging into today. We've pulled together some really interesting sources. We've got the latest billionaire rankings, from places like Banshore and Wikipedia. Then there's a closer look at the wealthiest women from Unbiased, and the Indian Express has a piece on the top 10 richest folks and where they went to university. But we're trying to go beyond just like who went where. We're actually diving into a pretty significant academic paper from the CSF. It's called Wealth, Savings, and Returns Over the Life Cycle, the Role of Education. So the idea is to move past just looking at who's rich and try to understand the mechanisms behind it all, especially that surprising role education seems to play.
Right. So our mission for you, listening in, is pretty clear. We want to cut through the noise a bit, maybe reveal some surprising stuff and help you see how education choices could affect wealth, maybe your own financial future, in ways you hadn't really considered.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into it. Okay, let's start big picture. The headlines. Forbes' 38th annual list says 2025 is a record year. We're talking 2,781 billionaires around the globe. And their combined net wealth, get this, $14.2 trillion. It's just, that's a staggering concentration of wealth, isn't it?
It really is staggering. And if you look at the Bezos list for, say, August 2025, you see some fascinating figures. Take Elon Musk, South African-born engineer, right? Tesla, SpaceX, his fortune. It's massively tied to pushing sustainable energy and, making us a multi-planet species, as he puts it. Then completely different, you have Bernard Arnault and his family. They run LVMH. That's the world's biggest luxury goods group, Louis Vuitton, Dior, all those huge brands.
Yeah.
His wealth is built on this sprawling luxury empire.
A very different path indeed.
Exactly. And then, of course, the tech giants. Mark Zuckerberg, co-founder of Facebook, which is Meta Platforms now, he famously became the youngest self-made billionaire ever back when he was just 23. And Jeff Bezos started Amazon as an online bookstore in, 94? And just revolutionized retail. Plus, he owns the Washington Post, Blue Origin. So, yeah, diverse figures, industry titans, tech disruptors, you name it.
And it's not just men at the top either. That piece from Unbiased gives us a look at the wealthiest women. Alice Walton from the Walmart fortune, she's listed with around $115 billion. And Francoise Bettencourt-Myers, the L'Oreal heiress, Unbiased, actually calls her the richest woman in the world with about $90.7 billion. So a lot of this is significant inherited wealth, but it's also, skillfully managed, grown over time.
That's a really key point, how these numbers are tracked. Forbes, for example, has its real-time billionaires list. It updates daily. It's all based on stock market movements, economic shifts, big ownership changes. It's very dynamic, constantly changing.
So, this snapshot shows us a landscape that's incredibly varied, different industries, different paths. But you still wonder, is there some hidden pattern underneath it all? Especially with education. Do these hugely successful people share similar educational backgrounds? Or is it just, a total mix? And maybe more importantly, what does that really tell us about how wealth is actually built?
Yeah.
Okay, let's tackle that head on. What do the Indian Express and our other sources say about the education side of things for these billionaires? Because it really seems like quite a spectrum.
Oh, absolutely. It's fascinating because whenever you talk about billionaires in education, you immediately think of the famous dropouts, right? Those stories are almost legendary, like Mark Zuckerberg, enrolled at Harvard, but then left to pour everything into Facebook. That was kind of the poster child story.
Right.
And Larry Ellison, too. He actually dropped out of two universities, University of Chicago and University of Illinois, before he went on to build Oracle. So these stories really highlight, pure drive and vision over formal credentials, I suppose.
But that's definitely not the whole picture, is it? Because you look at others on that list, and they have incredibly deep, prestigious educational backgrounds. Take Elon Musk. He started at Queen's University in Canada, then transferred to the University of Pennsylvania, got degrees in business and physics. He even started a PhD program in energy physics at Stanford, though he left that early. Still, that's a serious academic grounding.
A very serious foundation.
And Jeff Bezos.
Yeah.
He graduated from Princeton. Degrees in electrical engineering and computer science.
Nice.
Very technical.
Yep. And then you have the Google guys, Larry Page and Sergey Brin. Page got his bachelor's in computer engineering from Michigan, then a master's in computer science from Stanford. That's where he met Brin.
Right, the Stanford connection.
Exactly. And Brin. He came from the University of Maryland Math and Computer Science before he also headed to Stanford for his PhD. And boom, Google started right there. And we can keep going. Jensen Huang, CEO of NVIDIA, undergrad in electrical engineering from Oregon State, master's also in electrical engineering from Stanford. Lots of Stanford connections here.
Seems like a theme.
It does pop up, yeah. And then there's the investing legend. Warren Buffett studied business at Nebraska, then economics at Columbia. That's where he really honed his whole value investing philosophy. So, yeah, deep academic dives, often at really elite schools.
It's interesting historically, too. Wikipedia points out Zuckerberg was the youngest self-made billionaire at 23, and the Google founders hit billionaire status around 30.
And just for historical perspective, Madam C.J. Walker, way back in the early 1900s, she's often cited as the first self-made female millionaire. So that entrepreneurial spirit finding success, it's always been there.
So, okay, looking at these giants, it really is a mixed bag. Elite degrees, famous dropouts. On the surface, you'd say, okay, there's no single education recipe for hitting the jackpot. But maybe that's the wrong way to look at it. Does this apparent randomness point to something else? Like, does education have a causal impact on wealth, something that goes way beyond just getting you into a good job or even starting a huge company? Maybe it's about how people build and manage wealth across their whole lives, whether they end up on a top 10 list or not. And that's where this next source gets really interesting.
Right. This is where that academic paper from the CSF is just invaluable. The study Wealth, Savings, and Returns over the Life Cycle. The Rule of Education, it really tries to nail down the causal link, moving beyond just saying, oh, educated people tend to be richer. They used amazing data, longitudinal data, covering the entire population of Sweden. And critically, they controlled for all sorts of things that could muddy the waters. Things like family background, innate ability. They even compared variations within families, between siblings, all to really isolate the true impact of education itself.
Okay, so when you say they isolated the impact, they used something called an instrumental variable, right? Can you break that down a bit? Why does that make the research so strong?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a clever technique. So instead of just seeing that more education and more wealth go together, they needed to find something that caused some people to get more education, but wasn't directly linked to their future wealth for other reasons, like ambition or family connections. In this case, they used a historical reform in Sweden's compulsory schooling system. Basically, this reform acted like a natural experiment. It forced some groups of people to stay in school longer than very similar groups who just missed the cutoff for the reform.
Okay. So it's like comparing two groups that were almost identical, except one group had to get more schooling because of the law change.
Exactly. By comparing those groups, they could measure the direct effect of that extra schooling, stripping away the influence of things like family money or just being naturally smarter or more driven. It's about finding a clean comparison to see what difference the education itself made. It's about as rigorous as you can get in this kind of research.
Got it. That's fascinating. So, okay, with that level of scientific rigor, what do they actually find? How does education shape our financial destiny in ways that go beyond just the paycheck?
Well, the findings are pretty striking. The main takeaway: education has a, quote, positive, large, and long-lasting effect on net worth. Interestingly, this effect is pretty small when people are young, but it grows substantially over their working lives and becomes largest right around retirement age. It's a long-term game.
Okay, so it builds over time, but how? Where does that extra net worth come from?
That's the really interesting part. It affects basically everything on your personal balance sheet. It's not just one thing. So having at least some college, anything beyond high school, leads to significantly more financial wealth and more real estate wealth. To give you a rough idea, by your early 30s, say 30, 34, that could mean maybe $20,000 more in financial assets and $20,000 more in real estate compared to someone who started after compulsory school. And by the time people are in their mid to late 40s, age 45, 49, that effect on real estate wealth actually doubles. The more educated folks are more likely to own homes, and they tend to own bigger homes.
Wow. So it's not just income, it's tangible assets. But what about the flip side? Debt. Does more education mean more debt, too?
Yes, it does, especially early on. The study found education also increases outstanding debt. Now, when you're younger, say early 30s, about 60% of that extra debt for the most educated group is student loans. Makes sense, right? Investing in yourself.
Sure, that's logical.
But later on, by your mid-40s, the picture changes. Most of the difference in debt, like 75% of it, isn't student loans anymore. It's things like mortgages. which again ties back to them owning more and bigger real estate assets.
Okay, so the debt profile changes. But what's driving the overall increase in wealth? Is it just higher earnings?
That's part of it, of course. Higher earnings help. But the study identified two other key drivers: higher savings rates and, crucially, higher returns on their investments among the more educated. Early in life, the wealth boost seems to come mainly from actively saving more, particularly funneling money into real estate. As people get older, the focus shifts more towards increasing contributions to things like private pensions. Just going to college, for instance, was found to increase a person's overall saving rate by about 5 percentage points. That's a significant behavioral difference.
5 percentage points more saved. Okay, that adds up. But you mentioned investment returns, too.
Yes, and this is potentially huge over the long run. Later in life, what they call passive appreciation, just the growth of your existing assets, becomes really important. And the study found that more educated individuals tend to hold a higher risky share in their portfolio.
Risky share. What does that mean exactly? Gambling.
No, not gambling. It means they're more likely to allocate their money to assets like stocks or mutual funds, maybe more investment properties, rather than keeping everything in super safe, low return places like cash or basic savings accounts. These riskier assets generally offer higher expected returns over the long term, even though they come with more volatility. Think stocks versus savings bonds.
Gotcha. So a different investment strategy.
Exactly. And it's not just that they hold more of these assets. The study also found that the risky parts of their portfolios actually tend to earn higher returns, even after you account for things like fund management fees. Now, the difference might seem tiny year to year, maybe like 10 basis points, which is just 0.1%. Doesn't sound like much.
1%, okay.
But compound that small difference over, say, a 20-year period, like from age 30 to 49. That tiny edge can add up to a 20 percentage point difference in the total returns you've earned. That's a 20% boost over 2 decades, just from slightly better investment performance.
Wow. Okay, that puts it in perspective. So this research completely shifts the focus, doesn't it? It suggests that just looking at the higher salary you might get from a degree vastly understates the total economic benefit of education.
Precisely.
It's about building financial sophistication. It's about savings habits, investment choices, understanding risk and return, and letting that compound interest work for you over your entire life. It's a whole wealth-building toolkit, not just a bigger paycheck.
Okay, so armed with those really powerful insights from the research, let's just quickly broaden the lens again. What about some of the emerging fortunes, the younger generation, or strategies beyond the usual tech or finance paths? Sure. Well, Beansure actually points out some of the youngest billionaires, like Livia Voigt from Brazil. She's apparently only 19 or 20 years old and holds about $1.1 billion in shares of WG. It's an industrial equipment company her grandfather co-founded. So it highlights that quite a few of the youngest billionaires are actually heirs. They inherited their wealth. We also see the Mystery brothers in Ireland, 26 and 28, each with nearly $5 billion from stakes in Tata Sons, also inherited.
So inheritance is still a major factor at that level.
Definitely. But even inherited wealth needs managing. If we loop back to the wealthy women we mentioned, like Alice Walton or Francoise Bettencourt-Myers from the Unbiased piece, their ongoing success often involves really strategic investment decisions, maintaining significant ownership in thriving businesses, diversifying assets, across real estate, maybe tech, consumer goods. And increasingly, you see philanthropy and focusing on sustainable business models as part of their strategy too, which builds influence alongside financial wealth. It's rarely just sitting back and collecting dividends. There's active management involved.
Right. So it seems whether the fortune started with inheritance or was built from scratch, the examples we're seeing still connect back to those core ideas from the research, don't they? Building and growing wealth seems to fundamentally rely on smart saving, smart investing, and harnessing that compounding effect over time. And the research really suggests education plays a key role in equipping people with the skills and maybe the confidence to make those smarter decisions throughout their lives.
I think that's a great way to put it. The foundation matters. Hashtag outro.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. Our deep dive today really show that while the stories behind the biggest fortunes are incredibly varied, Harvard dropouts on one end, PhDs on the other, there seems to be this undeniable causal link between education and how wealth builds up over a lifetime. It's driven by, well, a mix of things.
Yeah.
Saving more actively, making different, perhaps more sophisticated investment choices, being more comfortable with that risky share we talked about, and ultimately achieving slightly better portfolio returns that really add up over decades.
Exactly. It hammers home that education is about so much more than just getting a higher starting salary. It seems to be about developing financial sophistication, critical thinking, maybe just the skills and knowledge needed to make better financial decisions consistently. It fundamentally shapes not just what you bring in, but critically how you manage and grow that money year after year through saving, through investing. It's about the long game.
It really does make you think, doesn't it?
Mhm.
So here's something to chew on. Considering how education seems to influence not just earnings, but these deep-seated habits around saving, investing, and growing wealth over decades, what hidden long-term advantages might we still be underestimating when we think about the value of pursuing knowledge?